How was this experience playing in PogChamps?
This event sucked. Chess sucks. France sucks.
One thing you want to note about these positions is that when you play sort of a hippopotamus defense where you're trying to put pressure on these central pawns, if you're white, you really need to be careful and like, for example, move a bishop here. I would have personally recommended against the hippo you play queen d2, knight e7, and just bishop e2, so that none of the pawns are under attack in the center of the board here, and then you can castle right away. Because when you go here, already it gets a little bit iffy. Pawn on d4 is under attack, and you either have to move like a queen, a bishop, or a bishop, and it already feels a little bit awkward. So queen e3, queen d7, a3 castle. Now here Sardoche plays b4. Now one thing that I cannot stress enough, that's really important, is that when you play on the center, when you try to attack with pawns on the wings of the board, like A and B file or G and H file down towards your king, when your opponent starts flinging their pawns on either side based on castling, one thing you want to remember is that you want to attack in the center. So it's very important that you try to attack in the center or open the center of the board. So in this position, Rainn could have played pawn to e5 and he would have been winning. And the reason he's winning is if you take with the pawn, black recaptures, and now it's actually a fossil. You lose one of your bishops here because of the discovery on this bishop on d3 here, so you actually end up losing the game, or losing a piece. Maybe not losing the game, but you're in really bad shape. And if you don't take the pawn here and you move like bishop here, black can just take the pawn, and it's actually a clean fork. The knight and the bishop both hold the pawn, and this is a complete disaster for white. So e5 was a big miss by Rainn. He goes rook f8. Not a bad move. He kind of tunnels on the idea of playing f5 though. And one thing you want to remember if you play fianchetto setups is you always want to be aware of pawn pushes with e5. Always. So it's really, really important. So rook f8, b5, knight a5 is played. e5, f5, trade, rook d1. And now here Rainn kind of starts to tunnel. What Rainn really needed to do was he needed to play h6 and g5. Again, you've got to look at the position here. Can you push in the center? If you push this one, you open this up, it looks very iffy. You can't push this one because obviously I take him with the rook on d1. It makes no sense whatsoever. So if you can't push these two, where's your play? So the play in this position is actually using this diagonal and starting to expand on the king side with h6 and g5 here. Really, really important to play like this. So instead he goes knight b3, bishop c2, good move by Sardoche, and now he castles. And this was a very funny moment in the game, because even though Sardoche blunders a pawn, in a way it was a very brilliant blunder, because it actually makes it easy to play. In this position, if you're white, let's just say black goes, I don't know, h6 here, you have to know to play c5 and rip open this diagonal and the c file. And it's not so obvious that you can go for that. So in a way, by blundering the two juicers here on c4 and a3, it actually gives Sardoche a great position, because now he can see the open lines. He can see the open a file, and he can see the open c file. When you combine that with a weak pawn on e6, as well as a great diagonal for this dark square bishop on f4, it's really, really good. So queen e2, knight a3 is played here. Bishop to b3 played. Knight d5 takes. Now Rainn here needed to, I guess, to take with the pawn. Already it's a very iffy position. As you guys can see, based on the evaluation bar, black is currently +2. He's up 2 pawns, but even the computer gives white a big advantage here. And that's one of the things that makes chess very hard at times, because there's this dynamic imbalance where you can be behind materially, but again, if your monarch is not safe, you can actually end up getting checkmated, even though by the math you're ahead. Knight d5 is played. Trade. I mean, he plays rook c1. It's this, I guess, actually rook c1 is better, because if you take here first, after rook c1 there's knight c4, and black kind of clogs the file, whereas in the game when you go rook check, you can't clog the file in time by putting the knight on c4, and now the rook gets c6, and now this rook is posted here by the pawn, and there's big threats towards the pawn on d6, and of course the queen on e2 holds the pawn on b5. So now knight c4 is played. Here Sardoche goes rook c1. Not the best move, to be clear, but a good move nonetheless. The best move is knight d2, trying to rip open this diagonal for your bishop and your rook. But rook c1 is a good move because it has the same idea of making a sacrifice and attacking on this diagonal. So now rook c8 is played, and here Sardoche goes rook takes c4. Brilliant move by Sardoche. And Rainn plays rook takes, which is a big mistake. He had to take on c4. And I'm kind of curious what would have happened after rook takes d6. queen c7 here, because there are some fossils, like you can play rook b6, but after pawn takes, bishop takes, the rook is behind the pawn, and this pawn is going right down the board in a hurry here towards the c1 square with this rook behind it. So it would have been very interesting to see what Sardoche would have done. Now queen e6 is winning because now you threaten to take and end the game. But again, very difficult move. I don't know. I mean, I think it's hard to believe Sardoche would have found queen e6. But that's how it goes. Bishop takes instead of rook. This is actually a very bad move, because now black goes king, I don't know, b7. I guess a8 better. And you're actually losing, because in this position there's no attack anymore. So that's why you have to take with the rook and open up this diagonal. Instead, Rainn takes. Now after rook takes, the game kind of peters out very quickly into victory. Or not peters out, but it ends very quickly, because now white just simply has a bishop and a knight, and white's ahead material. So bishop f8, knight g5, bishop h6. Now Sardoche takes, taking with the rook, but it would have been a little bit cleaner, but again, not a big deal. He takes, king b7, rook c7, and this is kind of the last spot. If Rainn had gone king e8, I still think Sardoche wins with knight e6 and knight c7, but it's not clear what happens. After king b7, impossible for Sardoche not to see rook c7, and now after takes queen e5, the game basically ends because of the pyramid, the double attack, and the rest doesn't really need any explanation, but I will give you guys the moves. And here, very nicely, a5 is played. And now after pawn takes a6, the game basically ends, because you get the lolly checkmate with the pawn and the queen after the en passant. And queen b7, game ends, and that's checkmate. King cannot go anywhere, and that's all she wrote. So Sardoche wins the second game, which forces us to go to the blitz game, third and final game, the sudden death 5-0 game. Now, I will say that in retrospect, looking back, I kind of wonder if it shouldn't have been like 5 minutes with a small increment, like 2 seconds versus straight up 5-0. But that is a discussion for another day. Okay. Okay, so let's pop up the final game as well. So this game starts at e4. e4, c5, knight f3, e6, b3, same as the previous game, knight c6, bishop b2, d5, trade, and now here Rainn goes bishop e2. Again, very difficult to again, if you don't know what to do, I mean, the correct move is probably bishop b5, knight f6 castles, bishop e7, and something like knight e5 or d4 again. As you see, though, it's not easy to play here for either side. Why is the final only best of 2? Also a question mark. I'll talk about that afterwards. But anyway, Rainn goes bishop e2, a little bit passive, knight f6, castles, bishop e7. Pretty standard. I'll flip the board. Pretty standard from Sardoche here. Just developing and castling the king. h3 castles, bishop b5, bishop d7, rook e1, and now rook e8. Again, not much more to say. Knight c3, a6 takes. Now here, Rainn finds a very good move. If black can play d4 here, like let's just say you go knight e2, black goes d4, and you open up this great diagonal for this bishop here, and you can even line up a battery. So it's imperative here, also because not only do you line up the battery, but look at these bishops. Like, when you look at these diagonals here, you'll see that this diagonal for this bishop is completely blockaded by the pawn, so you have no scope, but this bishop is completely open to attack towards g2. So when white plays d4, you'll notice that now the bishop is behind a pawn. You really would love to push this pawn and excavate the diagonal, but you can't really do that here after d4, whereas with white, if white trades the pawns, for example, let me just make some random moves, you'll notice that in this position, this bishop is open, and this bishop is stuck behind a pawn. So it's actually very tricky to play from a positional standpoint. But d4 is a very good move by Rainn. b5, knight e2. Now again here, Rainn needed to take the pawns and open up his diagonal and excavate towards the knight on f6 with the bishop on b2. And if this happens, I mean, again, you see from the computer, black is still a little bit better, but it's not trivial. Instead, he goes knight e2, c4. Good move by Sardoche now, because now you'll see that both bishops are unhappy. This bishop is walled, and this bishop is walled. So neither side is getting an open diagonal to attack on with either the bishop on b2 or the bishop on c6. So knight f4, bishop d6, queen d2, queen c7, knight e5. Now here Sardoche goes knight e4, very good move. Queen e3, f6, another picture perfect move, takes. And now here Sardoche actually makes a slight mistake. Again, hard to be critical in a blitz game in terms of what's going on, but he takes. Queen f3 is played here by Rainn, and now queen c7, an epic blunder by Sardoche here, trying to line up the battery and attack the knight on f4. What he should have played was gone pawn to c3 because the knight supports it and the queen supports. So white can't take, you only have 1-2 attacking, and I have 1 and 2 defending. You can't go here because then I just eat the bishop. And when you go bishop c1, there's now this amazing move, knight to d2, creating sort of a fossil because you hit the rook and you hit the queen. And when white takes back, you just take with the pawn. And basically, I guess rook d1's a move, although I still think here, the bishop f4, I guess rook e4 is good. At any rate, there's a lot of pressure coming down the open file, and you have a very advanced pawn. So this would have been good. Knight g5 was also a move that I thought during the game might be playable as well. But this would have been a better move. Instead, he goes queen c7. And now here, as you'll see from the bar going burr, this is a huge blunder because after knight takes d5, not only does it attack your queen, but it removes the defender of the knight. So now white's attacking this knight with a rook and a queen, and your queen's under attack. So you can't move your queen like here because I'll capture. There's no way to actually support the knight and move your queen. And if you do go queen to like f7, for example, attacking the knight, white just takes the knight. And if you recapture this knight, then I take with check and I fossilize your queen on d5, and that's game over. Because when you take back, I just eat the queen. So basically, what ends up happening here is that after knight d5, bishop h2 is played by Sardoche. A nasty little check. It's actually very innocuous because if white goes here, there's no checkmate with takes because even though the queen supports the bishop and it's checked, white just very commonly takes your knight on f2. And if you move your queen to like d6, for example, I can just take the knight. And I think if this happens, I think Rainn wins the game. I think it's probably 80% Rainn wins, 20% Sardoche wins. And the reason that I say that is because the bishop is in really bad shape here on h2. But on top of that, your rooks are really misplaced as well. So you can't take because then I trade the rook and take your queen. So that's the first thing. And if you trade the rooks and I take, you can't move your bishop, but I'm also threatening knight e7 to fossilize your rook on a8. So it's very hard for black to play, and I think the black's losing another bishop, if not the rook. So I'm not saying that Sardoche can't still win, but he would have lost more material. It wouldn't have just been one knight. And when you combine it with the fact that black only has pawns and there's no imbalance, like there are no passed pawns, I think Rainn would have had very good chances here to win the game. And it's only because of the pawns. If black has some kind of passed pawn or some imbalance, I think there's a chance. There would have been a chance. But I do think based on where these pawns are and the fact that it's all symmetrical, and black's going to lose probably at least a bishop here, I think Rainn would have had good chances being up at least 2 pieces. But that being said, this didn't happen. Instead, Rainn plays king to f1 here. And after king to f1, knight to d2, which not only is it a fork, but more importantly, it's a checkmate. The king cannot come up because the rook holds the square and the bishop holds g1. So the king is actually stuck there. And if your king cannot move and it's under attack, that's game over. Only 1 minute. Well, the reason I think Rainn would have won there, or I mean would have had really good chance of winning, is because it would have been 2 pieces. It wouldn't have just been 1 knight. That's the thing that I would say about it. If it had been just 1 piece, I think Sardoche, like for example, if you go back here after king h1, let's say you get some position like this, for example, where black could somehow, like, I don't know, let's just say you go here and you get some position like this. If black can keep it where it's like it's a knight and a bishop against a bishop, I think Sardoche wins probably 85-90% of the time, with Rainn having a minute. But the fact that in this position you end up in a situation where, sorry, let me go here, where probably you're gonna have to like go king h8, and after something like, I don't know, like g3, or even something like knight to f4, I mean, you're gonna lose the bishop as well. So because I think you're gonna lose the bishop as well and be down 2 pieces, I think Rainn would have had great chances because you also have rook e1 and try to exchange something in the center here. But again, I'm not saying that would have been the case, but I think Rainn would have had good chances because I don't think it would have just been one piece that it would have been ahead. I think it would have been 2. Instead, he goes king f1, and here Sardoche finds knight d2. Brilliant move by Sardoche, leading to a checkmate. It's a fork, but more importantly, it's checkmate. And with that, Sardoche wins PogChamps 3. He wins the champions bracket, and he gets a nice big grip 6 belt for winning. So once again, big shout out to Sardoche for winning the game. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit in general about PogChamps 3. You know, I think there are a couple things that I want to say. One thing in terms of PogChamps in general as an idea is that you want to give these streamers a chance to compete, but have fun along the way. Now, for someone like Sardoche, I think actually fun is the wrong word to use. I think for Sardoche, he sort of was stressing out the whole time. You know, you could see a lot of emotion for him, but you know, it really hit home when at the end of the event when he won, he was saying how he's played in so many Twitch rivals, he's played in League of Legends, done a lot of things in terms of competition, but this is something that he will never forget. And to give you an example, I also when I hit the 1 million followers on Twitch, there was a message from Gripix, not to be confused with Gripsix, but from Gripix, the streamer, Gripex, and Gripix wrote a message, and he was talking about his whole experience in PogChamps and how it was a memory that he would never forget. And to see like Gripix say that from PogChamps too, and then to see like Sardoche essentially saying the same thing, it really does echo in many ways why chess is special, and chess sort of in sort of the cultural collective, it has this place that it's valued, I would say, more highly at times than like other games. And so it was really great to see for Sardoche. When you see streamers say stuff like that, you can hear Sardoche being emotional, saying that he'll never forget it. It really is it really is special, and it really does bring a smile to my face, because you could tell like how much work he put in, all the stress, all the nerves, everything that's going on, and like being so serious about it. And so that really, like, that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Is something that these streamers will remember. It's something that they can cherish. So I was really happy for Sardoche. I actually myself, when I heard him saying that, I was having trouble not getting a little bit emotional too, because it was really great to see when he won. Also, a big shout out to Nico as well. She did win the consolation bracket. She played some great chess, really on point, good fast moves for the most part. It turned out not really being that close when all was said and done, because she was simply just overwhelming. I think her speed combined with just general instinct and trusting herself was really amazing. And then also what I would say as well is that it was interesting to note with Nico the way that she could just move fast and not have any fear or any doubts or any lack of self-confidence. And I felt like with Sardoche, when he played when he was playing the Blitz games, it felt like he did the same thing. Like there was no fear. He just, like, he didn't have doubts. He just trusted himself. He made the quick moves without overthinking and worrying so much. And, you know, to use another example, I felt like with XQC, he had a lot of great, his first instinct was right most of the time, but he would always start to doubt himself, and he would panic, and then he'd start thinking about like 2 or 3 other ideas and never go back to the original idea for the most part. And so it is interesting from a psychological standpoint to think about that. Yeah, no, I mean, I think what I would say is it was just incredible all around. So for me, this was my favorite of the PogChamps, for a couple of reasons. First of all, it felt like for the most part there were no games that really ended very early on in the opening. I would say it felt like all the matches were competitive. Sure, you had some matches like Sardoche against Myth, which, you know, when all was said and done, Sardoche did win, but Myth was competitive at least for the first like 15 to 20 moves. And the sort of the fact that it seemed like all the matches were really competitive, that really made it feel very different to me versus say PogChamps 1 or PogChamps 2 in general sense. So I thought for me, just seeing the competitiveness, seeing how everyone was like trying, there didn't seem to be any major mismatches for the most part, especially not once we were in the bracket stage, was incredible. You know, you saw like Ludwig come just short against Sardoche. I mean, he very easily could have won that match. Charlie also, I mean, very unfortunate that he didn't win that second game against Rainn Wilson to force a tiebreaker. So all the matches, all the comebacks, I mean, there were so many matches where it was 1-0 and ended up like it ended up 1-1, and then like there was a dramatic third game, was just incredible to watch. I mean, Benji's progress as well, very easily could have won that second game yesterday, and then who knows what happens today. But really good, lot of competitive matches. Thank you, Katie Mears, for 3, GKR America for the Prime, and Weegand V for the Prime. Thank you so much, appreciate it. So what about Wilson, coach? I feel like